Hello and welcome. You are watching Property Question Time. I'm Keith Maynard, and as always, I'm joined by an expert panel who are here with one thing in mind. They're all about answering your property-related questions. So let's meet today's panel. Firstly, we have Stefano Lucatello, the senior partner of Cobbold Law. We also have Cobbold, the COO of PayProp Limited. And we have Suchit, Punnose, the CEO of Red Ribbon Asset Management. Welcome, gents.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all again. Good to have the regulars back at the table. And we have, as always, some fascinating questions, some of them long, some of them short. And Suchit, you pulled the short straw. You're first with a whopper. It's a big 6-in-1. My father is a NRI, Indian citizen living in the UK, and is considering selling some land in Kerala to a relative that lives in Kerala, an Indian citizen. I have some questions about real estate transactions in India. My understanding is that the seller cannot execute a title transfer from abroad and must be present in India for the title transfer or give power of attorney to someone in India. Also, does a seller have to file the sale with a tax authority and report inflation-adjusted capital gains and pay tax on these gains? This applies to NRIs as well. What is the correct form to file? And lastly, if my father wishes to gift some of the proceeds to his siblings living in India, is there an issue with this? Are there any tax implications? It's a truly massive question.
Right, well, the size of the country reflects, I think, the size of the question in a way. Well, I think the first bit is about selling land and do you get taxed in India. I think, yes, if you're an NRI, Indian citizen, and you are disposing an asset, there is a taxable point in that. I think the point here is that the seller will need to get a PAN, which is a permanent account number, which is a taxman's reference number, which is a simple, straightforward online process, and you will need to file your tax return with what that income is. Now, there are several offsets available in terms of capital gains or any other offsets that are available before the tax is computed, and for that he needs to approach a local tax advisor who can talk about the current rules and how that would be applicable. Execution of the title, yes, you can give a power of attorney or go down there. That's a simple, straightforward process in terms of executing it. I think, sorry, what was the last one in there? There was...
Well, if my father wishes to gift some of the proceeds to his siblings in India.
Yes, so again, that would come under the local gift tax rules. There are taxes applicable for gifting. It's all slabbed in terms of what sort of rebates you can get on the tax. Should contact a local tax advisor or to compute that again. That can all be wrapped up in when you file the tax return. All of that can be wrapped up into that as well, for his siblings and for him. So it's one. The transactions are reflecting on two tax returns. I think that's the key point when you're filing it. So it's easier for the taxman to figure out what is happening across one transaction, especially with the non-resident involved.
Really well answered there, Suchit. Thanks for giving us a little bit of light through the tunnel there on that one. Okay, let's move on. And Stefano, this is a question for you. Again, this seems to be the day of big questions. Yesterday evening, I got home from work to find the council had stolen around 6 foot of my garden and damaged a tree which is over 20 years old. They're developing land behind my house and are increasing the gate sizes that are next to my property. To be clear, the gate size was not being increased in the development, or was not evident at least. We were notified about the development, but there was nothing on the plans to widen the gate in any way, and we did object to parts of the development. We received no letter or notification that this is happening. To top this off, we've just sold our house and are waiting for the chain now. We fear that this will affect the sale of land and make the agreed boundary invalid. We really don't know what to do as the council are not helpful and intend taking our land in 21 days. What else can we do?
Find a solicitor. What else would you want to do in a situation like that? First port of call, solicitor, of course. I take it we're talking about English law here, not a French law, Spanish law, or anywhere else.
This is a UK law issue.
Okay. All right. The gentleman uses very strong terms. He says the council stole. Now, we need to understand clearly whether he actually owns this piece of land and whether it's within his title deeds, it's on his plans, it's actually written that he owns it, or whether he has possibly, like many of us over the years, encroached onto some public area of land in the hope that 20 years would pass and he would inherit, he would take ownership by occupation and by no one objecting. So the first thing is, we need to understand clearly whether he does physically own the land because he bought it or it was gifted to him or someone left it to him, or whether he has gradually encroached his garden and thought that he was getting away with it. The second thing to say is this, that irrespective of whether he's looked at the plans and it was there or it wasn't there, my view is this, that if he actually owns the land, then he should be ringing the council up and saying, unless within 7 days you come off my land and you put everything back, you restore my tree, buy me a new tree, restore the land to what it was before you encroached on my land, then I will take out an injunction, a private injunction. Now this could cost anything from £15,000 to £20,000. The council, if they, with their legal department, review the situation and come down with a surveyor, they will soon back off and they will say, sorry, we got it wrong, we'll put everything right, etc. However, if he doesn't have any real legal title to the land which is being stolen from him, then he might have to just say, I can't do anything, I had it for such a long period of time, but I'm no longer going to be able to benefit from this piece of land because the land really is the council's and they have come in and they've taken back what is theirs.
So it's got to be in his deeds.
Yes.
And if it's not in his deeds, if it's over 20 years and he's been...
20 years or more, and he's occupied it and fenced it off,
right,
and nobody has objected to it.
In that 20-year period?
In that 20-year period, then he can go and he can register it as his own. Now we'd have to we really need to see.
If he hasn't registered it as his own, but he's fenced it off and it's been more than 20 years, he can
lay a claim. He can lay a claim
right,
to it and say, I've been here, nobody has objected to it, it's been fenced off, I'm making a claim.
Right, very interesting. Okay, I've got a few ideas now about what to do in my back garden.
I think probably give a lot of people a lot of ideas.
Is the cut-off the 20 years?
It's a 20-year period.
20 years?
Yes.
Wow, okay. That's really interesting. It's handy to know UK law, isn't it?
It's handy to have a solicitor.
Even better, touche. Okay, Neil, question for you here. So I'm currently looking to rent a house. I currently live in a housing association flat and want something better for my son. I found this house in a very nice area, very good schools, lovely garden, accepts pets and children. Wow. Bit more expensive than I was hoping to pay, but not at the top end yet. And a big plus is it's long term, so there's no immediate upheaval. However, called the estate agent and she says it's been on the market for a while. Last tenant was an elderly lady who sadly died. She said the kitchen has no cupboards and are pretty bare. The landlord is hoping the new tenant will make it a long-term home, but expects them to fit the kitchen in offering 1 month's rent free if they do so. Apparently tenants used to do this in the past. Do you have any advice? This is interesting because this has come up before, hasn't it?
It has, and there is this view of if you are going in and she's wanting something better for her son and a long term and she likes it long term, that is this some beneficial entitlement in actually you're doing that work? What she needs to make sure is that the landlord isn't actually just shirking his duties. There are basic requirements that he has to have the house to a standard to be able to let it. If it's that he's trying to say this is not of a lettable standard and I want you to take the onus of the works to bring it to a lettable standard, he's not legally allowed to do that. In the same way though, you can come to a lot of arrangements in this basis of negotiation. He also said that he wants them to fit the kitchen. Does this mean that he doesn't want them to purchase it, but he's wanting them in essence to become a labour force for him? In which case, if it doesn't stay up or it falls down and he as a landlord has a right of repair, who does that onus fall to? Where does the indemnity go? So there's a little minefield by taking it on yourself. What I have heard more of an arrangement is, here is the cost. What I'm expecting you to do is, so that I can put a better value to this to you, is to meet me somewhere with the cost. But I'm still going to get a professional to do this and put in, because ultimately the burden is mine as the landlord. Look, if the property is that good, if it's in the area, and if it's going out, have a conversation. Having the conversation that you're asking to us is perfect, but actually these are the questions that you should be broaching to the landlord and the agent who will go out. The agent should be there to actually make sure these questions are covered and that you know that your legal standing going in. And then have a view of it. It's not at the top end, it is more than you're looking to spend, but actually with that month off and with having a kitchen, and can you input on the kitchen and can you then make the property your own, something better for the long term? Is this something that you want to offset against the decision to take this property? But I think the fact that you found something that has pets, allows you to have children, is in the area where you want to stay and is a property that you're willing to look at, is a huge positive. Now let's have the negotiation point that you have with anything, even on buying the property. There's a negotiation takes place between the buyer and seller. The tenant's just getting more involved in that now, and the landlord being willing to enter that discussion isn't a bad thing. But whatever you agree, make sure you get it looked at, that it's not opening you up, that you're not taking any kind of responsibilities that are not yours, that landlords, and that he's not trying to shirk his legal responsibilities.
And it sounds like if it has been on the market for a while, there is room for negotiation, as you were saying. One quick question on that, and just give us a very quick answer. You said about whether it's in a acceptable standard for renting in the first place. Who decides that?
Well, there are legal requirements of what a landlord has to do by law under the Housing Act to be able to provide a unit ready for tenancy.
How could she check that that's the case, though?
So, number one, you're not going to go and read the Housing Act yourself. You should be going and asking these questions directly from the agent, and the agent will supply it, because then if there is anything wrong, there is always an indemnity for you to be able to go after, that you've asked the question and been given an answer by the person who's looking after you for the taking on of that property.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Suchit, we have just about enough time for a golden nugget from you, which I believe is to do, if I'm right, with alternative ways to invest in property in India. Yes?
Indeed, yes. I think I'd like to start by saying that there is a great opportunity in the Indian market for both yield, income and capital growth. And there's a lot of excitement on the ground in terms of genuine need for housing. To give you an idea, 22 million new homes are required as we speak at the moment. So that's the sort of macro of shortage of housing.
Sounds like the housing crisis is even bigger than ours.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, so I think it's a totally different dynamics in that here it's coming out of population growth, there it's coming out of urbanization, people who have homes moving into cities. Now, owning a property in your name is always quite interesting in that, it gives you that feeling of ownership, no doubt. But India, the other way to go about investing in India is to go into a property fund, which is where you have the fund and the fund manager who's an expert. He or she knows how to deal with all these issues on the ground in India, and you get a share of a return, just much the same way as you would have if you were directly owning the property. So think twice before you get excited to jump on a plane and go buy a property in Mumbai or Delhi or a tier 2 city. You could always go through a UK-based Indian real estate fund, which takes care of all the hassle and have got experts who know what they're doing on the ground.
And I suppose you can invest maybe less money than you thought you may have needed to get that yield and that return.
Indeed, yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much, Suchit. Well, we're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere, though. Lots more of your great questions after this. Welcome back. You're watching Property Question Time. I'm Keith Maynard, and on today's panel answering your questions, we have Stefano Lucatello, Neil Cobbold, and Suchit Punnose. Gentlemen, let's crack straight on with our viewers' questions. And this first one, Stefano, is coming to you. If I buy a house in Italy, can I confidently expect a UK lawyer to be able to handle the complex legalities for me, or do I need an Italian lawyer?
Well, the first thing to say, Keith, is this, that English law is different from Italian law. Italian law is something called civil law, and it's something called the Justinian Code or the Napoleonic Code. It's the law that Napoleon laid down throughout Europe wherever he conquered a country. And it's the form of Roman law that came before him. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that we have English law here, completely different. So if you go to your high street solicitor, the likelihood is that he or she would not be able to advise you, and if they did, they would be negligent on Italian law. An Italian lawyer is what you need, and there are Italian lawyers in the United Kingdom, of course there are. And that's what you need. The system of law is totally different, and as such, you need English lawyer to speak Italian, as it were. And you can do that. Do not go as a rule of principle, to someone you do not know. Have a referral, look them up. And as with all cases, as with English lawyers as well nowadays, we all get looked up and people come to us and say, are you registered on the Law Society of Royal? Are you SRA registered? Do the same thing in Italy. And make sure that the Italian lawyer, if you use an Italian lawyer who is not also a resident of the United Kingdom, has an office in the United Kingdom, make sure that he has an indemnity insurance policy like we are obliged to do under SRA rules for £3 million or more. So, because if he doesn't do something correctly and he represents you, then you have a recourse back to that lawyer. But usually the case is, on many occasions, that when an agent sells you a property in Italy, he will say you don't need an English lawyer, you don't need an Italian lawyer, go straight to the notaio. The notaio is the public servant who writes the final deed and who represents the state. He doesn't represent the vendor or the purchaser because the system is totally different in Italy than it is in England. We don't have a solicitor representing the vendor and a solicitor representing the purchaser. It's one person who registers the deed and who sees that the vendor signs and the purchaser signs, but he doesn't actually give legal representation to either of the two parties. He is a state-employed official, and that's what you must understand, that a notaio in Italy is a state-employed official and not someone who's giving you as a vendor or the purchaser advice. So yes, you do need legal advice. You can find an English lawyer who is also an Italian avvocato in England, yes.
Which is really, really good news. Excellent. So it's a lot more accessible than maybe you thought when you were asking that question. So thanks very much. Thank you very much, Stefano. Right. Suchit, also a shorter question than we had in the first half. So I hear you sighing with relief. What are the must-have documents when buying property or land in India for NRIs? That's non-resident
Indians, correct,
Indians,
yes.
yeah.
The documents needed are pretty straightforward. It's the standard documentation you would need as when you buy property here. So you need a proof of address and proof of ID, but you also need in India what is called an Aadhaar card, which is a card issued by the central government. It's got all the biometrics. It's a new thing. It's about a couple of years old, and that's a card you need because that's required for you to log yourself against the property title deed. So it's gone online in India, and you are registered as an individual or joint buyers and attached to this particular unique reference number that the government holds for you.
Is that hard to get hold of?
No, that's a very straightforward process, but they do scan your retinal scan and also fingerprint. So
wow,
that's a very secure way to ensure that there is that property is
and more
registered
advanced than in the UK currently.
Indeed, yes, yeah. I mean, this is a ginormous task the previous government launched, and I think they've got close to, I would have thought, about 100 million people already on it, and more coming onto it. And it'll kind of replace all other cards that are issued by the government. So it's pretty straightforward. A local lawyer, again, should be able to advise you on that.
Okay, wow. I'm again, nice bit of knowledge there. Is there any kind of possibility of that coming across to the UK, Suchit, at any point? Or?
I'm clear. I mean, I guess it's all come down to how technology is converging, and there are talks about how you can see it in the payment system where you've got Apple Pay, which is attached to a phone, and then it's tapping in, and it's a contactless, etc. So it's about that sort of big brother system of whether we're going to have the passport, our driving license, our tax reference card, and our mobile phone all rolled into one.
Well, iPhone X now, it says face recognition.
Indeed, yeah. So we are going towards that big brother state where everything is on one card, and which should make transactions easier and easy for people to transact across borders.
Yeah, which is what we all want at the end of the day.
Indeed, yes.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. Neil, question for you. And again, not always not as long as we're used to, which is good. Currently, my father has 2 properties plus his own home and is looking to move these into his property business that he set up a number of years ago. He wants to move these properties into the property business and also have myself and my sister as directors of the company and remove himself from the business. How would he go about doing this, and what tax implications would this cause for all 3 parties? I'm just going to say it before he says it. Maybe he needs to speak to a solicitor.
Well, also, and the other thing I want to say is that I'm not going to be commenting on the tax advice.
No, I was going to say,
regarding that is go and speak to a tax specialist. I think we need to get rid of some of the terminology on this question as to the way that they're going. He's not moving it from himself to a company. that will enact a sale. For him to take one legal owner on the title deed into the other, he is wanting to transfer the ownership of that property from him as an individual to the special purpose company that he has set up to run his property portfolio. There will be implications that he needs to look into there regarding realising the asset, capital gains and various things that they'd want to look at.
Even if he did it over a number of years, even if he, you know, added them both as directors, stayed on as a director for a certain amount of years and then withdrew.
Okay, but they're two different things. So
Okay.
one is the asset being owned by the company. That is an action to take place, and that doesn't matter, it can't take place over a number of years. That takes place when I change that it's owned by him as an individual or owned by a company.
Okay.
Who then owns the company is a separate question. And again, what he's talking about and what they're saying there is adding him as directors. It's not the directors that really is the issue. It's going to be the shareholding of the company that has the owning of the asset. And to remove himself from the business and to give it to his children, in essence, what he's been going to do is give them the share. And by having the assets in the property, that share has a value. Whether he sells it for £1 or realises it, it has an inherent value. And that's why they need a tax specialist to look at this. People are seeing this as a way of moving out of the stamp duty surcharges and some of the tax relief benefits that are being levied against landlords as a way of moving forward. That loophole only has certain implications, and long term it is something that I expect the government will look to tighten up on. That actually he needs somebody to show and weigh the benefits of actually just doing a straight transfer of ownership at this moment into his children, rather than if it needs to be in this special purpose vehicle.
Okay.
And I think too many people see this as a way of avoiding these costs without realising the implications that this transfer could have.
Okay, so at the end of the day, it's not a quick out.
No.
There will be implications. And as I think that famous person said, there are two things with certain of life, death and taxes. There we
Yes.
go. So thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate that. That's all we've got time for on today's property question time. But my thanks to each and every one of you for contributing so well as you always do. And my thanks to you for watching. Don't forget, if you want to ask some questions of one of our expert panels, you can do so. You can check the website and you can contact us at property-tv.co.uk. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.